It started as a casual conversation between two friends in a quiet barbershop on a Wednesday afternoon. Nothing serious, just two men in their 60s talking about life aches and the small shifts no one warns you about. One of them, Paul, leaned in a little and whispered, with a grin, "Hey, have you ever heard that if you don't ejaculate often it could be bad for your health? They say it might even lead to prostate problems." The other man, David, raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought it was the opposite. I've been trying to slow down, save my energy. Isn't that better as we get older?" And right there in that quiet moment between jokes and hair clippings, they stumbled into a question so many men carry silently. Should we be doing it more often? Is less harmful? Is more actually better? And what happens if we stop altogether? It's the kind of topic most people dance around. A little too personal. A little too misunderstood. A little too tangled between myths, shame, locker room advice, and the endless headlines that contradict each other every year. But here's the truth. Your sexual health is not just about numbers. It's not about keeping score. It's about connection. To your body. To your mind. To your energy. To what feels right for you in this season of life. So in this video, we're going to slow things down. We're going to talk about what really happens when you ejaculate often and when you don't. We'll look at the science, the stories, the misunderstandings, and the truths that actually matter. Because this isn't about performance, it's about presence. And if you've ever wondered what's best for your health, your hormones, and your heart, not just as a man, but as a whole person, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Paul couldn't stop thinking about it after the barbershop. That number, 21 times a month. He had heard it before, in a podcast, on a health blog, even from a friend who said it was doctor recommended. It sounded oddly specific, like brushing your teeth twice a day, like drinking 8 glasses of water. And now, apparently keeping track of 21 moments of release. But Paul wasn't 21. He was 65. And the idea of turning sex or even solo moments into a checklist didn't sit quite right. Still, the thought lingered. Could there be something to it? Turns out there is a study. Actually, more than one. Back in 2016, researchers looked at a group of men and compared those who ejaculated about 7 times a month to those who did it 21 times or more. The group with higher frequency seemed to have a lower risk of developing prostate cancer. In 2017, another larger study echoed the same pattern. Men who ejaculated more often showed fewer signs of prostate trouble later in life. On the surface, it sounds simple. Do this. Get that. But when you look closer, it's not that straightforward. These were retrospective studies. That means the researchers looked back at old data, asking men to remember how often they'd ejaculated sometimes, years or even decades before. And memory, as we know, is a tricky thing, especially when it comes to private habits. These studies didn't track people forward over time. They didn't control for other factors like diet, exercise, stress, or genetics. They simply noticed a pattern, not a proven cause. And that's important to understand. Just because two things happen together doesn't mean one causes the other. Still, that doesn't mean we throw it all out. Maybe the men who had a healthy sex life were also taking better care of themselves overall. Maybe they felt more connected, more energized, more in tune with their bodies. And maybe that was the real protective factor. So, here's the lesson. Science gives us clues, not commandments. If 21 times a month feels natural for you, great. But if it feels forced, pressured, or exhausting, you haven't missed the magic number. You've just outgrown the myth. Because sexual health isn't a game of counting. It's a practice of listening. And before we go any further, there's a question we need to ask, one that most men carry quietly. What happens if I don't do it at all? That's what we'll explore next. Paul didn't bring it up right away, but a few weeks after the barbershop chat over coffee with his younger brother, he finally asked, "So, if I don't do it for a while, what happens? Does it just stay there? like a tank that keeps filling up. His brother laughed, but not unkindly. That's a question more guys wonder than they admit. And he was right. There's a quiet fear some men carry, especially as they age, that not ejaculating for a long time could somehow hurt them. Maybe it causes swelling. Maybe it clogs something. Maybe it's unnatural. But here's the truth. The male body is wise. Seminal fluid is produced continuously by several glands like the prostate, the seminal vesicles, and the testicles. But it doesn't just build up endlessly like water in a balloon. When ejaculation doesn't happen, the body finds other ways to clear the excess. Some of it is reabsorbed and recycled. Some might be released during sleep as a nocturnal emission, also known as a wet dream. Some trace amounts can even pass out through urine or small muscular contractions during daily activities. It's not dangerous. It's not toxic. It's just part of the body's natural rhythm, quiet, automatic, and unbothered. Think of it like a garden. If you water the plants regularly, wonderful. But if you skip a few days, nature doesn't revolt. The soil adjusts. The roots adapt. Nothing explodes. Nothing turns to poison. And the same goes for your body. Of course, if a man experiences long periods of arousal without release, he might feel discomfort, sometimes called blue balls. It's not serious, just a bit uncomfortable, like a tension that didn't get to relax. But again, it's temporary, and your body, as always, finds its balance. So the next time someone tries to scare you with the idea that you must release regularly, or else, remember this, your body isn't a pressure cooker. It's a living, breathing system that knows how to take care of itself even when you're not looking. And once we let go of that fear, another important question begins to surface. If ejaculating less often isn't harmful, could doing it more often bring other benefits? More energy, better mood, higher testosterone? That's exactly what we'll explore next. It was a Saturday morning when Paul decided to try something. No fanfare, no grand experiment, just a quiet question he asked himself. What would happen if I did it every day? Not out of boredom, not from pressure, but just to see how my body responds. So for 2 weeks straight, Paul kept a little journal. Nothing fancy, just scribbles. Day 1. Felt relaxed afterward. Slept better. Day 4. Bit more energy in the morning. Day 7. Mood feels lighter. Day 12. Honestly, getting a little tired of it. That last note made him chuckle, because it revealed something most articles don't tell you. Daily ejaculation might bring some short-term benefits. Yes, for some men it can lead to a slight mood boost thanks to endorphins and oxytocin, the so-called feel-good hormones released during climax. It can also help with sleep stress relief and sometimes even sharpen focus like the body sighs in relief and resets. But does it increase testosterone? That's where things get more complicated. Some studies have found a very modest rise in testosterone levels following a few days of abstinence peaking around day 7. Others show no significant change at all, regardless of frequency. And when ejaculation is done too frequently, especially in the context of addiction or compulsion, it might actually lead to mental fatigue, decreased motivation, and irritability. Because again, it's not just about the act, it's about the intention behind it. Are you using it as a moment of connection or as a way to escape? Are you feeling more alive afterward? Or are you numbing something you haven't addressed? For Paul, the answer became clear by day 14. It's not the frequency that matters, he wrote. It's whether I'm present or not. And that's the real lesson here. Sexual energy is a resource, not one that needs to be hoarded or depleted, but one that responds to how we care for ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. If you find that daily ejaculation makes you feel more grounded and alive, then beautiful. If you find it leaves you tired or indifferent, then maybe less is more. There is no universal rule, only rhythms. And those rhythms shift with age, with hormones, with seasons of life. But what if you've gone too long without any rhythm at all? What if your desire has faded or never quite returned? That's what we're about to explore next. It started with a silence that Paul couldn't explain. Not a dramatic one, just the absence of a spark. Nights passed without the usual stirring of desire. He didn't miss it exactly, but he did notice the stillness. And then came the doubt. Is something wrong with me? Is this normal? Am I shutting down? So he did what most men don't. He asked. His doctor explained something that changed his entire perspective. Sexual desire isn't just about testosterone. It's about flow, blood flow, mental flow, emotional flow. And when there's no regular stimulation either from intimacy, fantasy, or even spontaneous erections, the body quite naturally may quiet that part of the system. Use it or lose it. That phrase might be cliché, but in this case, it holds weight. You see, the penis needs oxygen just like any other muscle, and during erections, oxygen-rich blood floods the tissues, keeping them supple, responsive, and healthy. When weeks or months go by without that process happening, even involuntarily during sleep, small changes can begin. Less elasticity, more collagen buildup, reduced sensitivity, and yes, over time, a greater risk of erectile dysfunction. But here's the good news. It's not irreversible. Many men in their 50s, 60s, even 70s have reignited their sexual function not through medication, but through gentle re-engagement. Small steps, a little attention, reconnection with sensation, fantasy, even touch. Paul started simple. He stopped seeing sex as a task and instead viewed it as a conversation with his own body. Some days were quiet. Some were awkward. But slowly, that silent spark began to flicker again. Because libido isn't something you chase. It's something you invite. And when we strip away the pressure, the shame, the numbers, the comparisons, we make room for something far more important, responsiveness. Not just of the body, but of the heart. So, if you've been worried that less desire means something is broken, pause. Ask. Reconnect. Because sexual vitality isn't measured in frequency, it's measured in presence. But what about the other side of the coin? Is there such a thing as too much? Could frequent ejaculation when driven by stress or habit actually do harm? That's what we're about to explore next. There was a season in Paul's life when he was chasing relief. Not connection, not curiosity, just release. The days were long. Work was stressful, and sometimes the quickest escape was a moment alone behind a locked door. 15 minutes, a quick reset, then back to emails, back to errands, back to pretending everything was fine. At first, it seemed harmless, even helpful, like a valve that let the pressure out. But after a few weeks, something shifted. He started waking up groggy. His motivation dipped. Things that used to excite him, reading music, even walking, felt dull. And the strangest thing of all, his desire didn't increase. It faded. That's when it hit him. He wasn't feeling better. He was just feeling numb. So he asked again, this time not his doctor, but a therapist. And the answer was gentle but honest. Frequent ejaculation, especially when done out of habit, boredom, or to soothe emotional discomfort, can sometimes leave a man feeling drained instead of energized. Not because it's wrong, but because it becomes disconnected from intention. You see, ejaculation isn't just a release of fluid. It's a neurochemical event. Each time the body spends small but measurable amounts of zinc, magnesium, and dopamine nutrients and messengers involved in energy, mood, and mental clarity. Done mindfully and in balance, this can feel invigorating. But when it becomes compulsive or daily without rest or purpose, the body doesn't always have time to replenish. Think of it like spending energy from a bank account. Occasional withdrawals, no problem, but daily without deposits, you start to feel the deficit. Paul realized he had turned a natural act into a coping mechanism, and like any habit done without awareness, it was no longer serving him. So he made a shift. He replaced a few of those autopilot moments with something else, a walk, a deep breath, a phone call to a friend. Not to shame himself, not to cut off pleasure, but to rebalance. Because true vitality isn't found in how often we release. It's in how connected we feel to the life around us and within us. And here's the thing. When we find that balance, not too much, not too little, we often notice something incredible returning. A sense of confidence, a spark, a quiet trust in our own rhythm. But what if you're still unsure where that rhythm is? How do you know if your current frequency is helping or hurting? Let's explore that together in the next part. Paul once asked his doctor a question that many men carry silently. So, how often is enough? Or too much? Is there a magic number I should aim for? The doctor smiled gently. There isn't one number, she said. There's your number, and it may change. At first, Paul felt a little frustrated. He wanted something clear, measurable, like the way you count calories or track steps. But the truth is, sexual rhythm isn't about counting. It's about listening. Listening to your body, to your mood, to your energy after, not just before. Some studies, as we've mentioned earlier, pointed to benefits around 21 times per month. Others say once a week is just as good if it feels aligned with your health and desire. So, how do you know what's right for you? You start by paying attention to 3 simple cues. First, how do you feel afterward? Energized, relaxed, numb, tired. Second, do you notice a change in your mood focus or sleep over time? Is it adding to your life or quietly draining it? Third, is it part of connection or just a habit? Paul began to realize that when he was more present during intimacy or even solo exploration, he felt better emotionally and physically. But when he rushed through it, used it to silence stress or boredom, or did it out of routine, the effect was the opposite. Less clarity, less drive, more guilt. So he made a small, powerful change. He stopped setting a goal and started setting an intention. Not, I must do this 3 times a week, but rather, when I do this, I'll be here for it. That shift brought him something numbers never could. A rhythm. His own rhythm. One that flexed with stress, with seasons, with age, but always returned to what mattered most. How he felt in his own skin. And maybe that's the deeper message here. Your body will speak, not always loudly, but clearly if you're willing to listen. So, instead of chasing someone else's schedule, why not honor your own? Which brings us to a different yet deeply connected question. What happens when we suppress sexual expression for too long? Could it lead to emotional or psychological consequences beyond the physical? Let's explore that next. It started slowly for Luis. A few months after his divorce, he realized he had gone weeks without a single intimate thought. No desire, no dreams, just flatness. He told himself it was normal. He was tired, busy, healing, but something deeper was happening. He stopped making eye contact, avoided mirrors, laughed less, and though he couldn't quite name it, a heaviness began to settle into his chest. At first, he thought he was just getting older, but deep down, he missed something more than physical release. He missed connection with himself. This isn't uncommon. You see, sexual energy isn't just about sex. It's about vitality, movement, expression, confidence. When we suppress it for long periods, especially not by choice, but by fear, shame, or circumstance, our minds notice. Multiple studies have shown that men who go long stretches without sexual expression can experience higher rates of anxiety, irritability, and even depressive symptoms. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they're cutting off a powerful form of self-connection. Think of it like a river. When it flows freely, even gently, It nourishes everything it touches. But when blocked for too long, that same water can stagnate. Emotionally, we become stuck, disconnected, and eventually our self-worth starts to erode. Luis didn't need a new partner or a performance pill. He needed permission to feel again, to explore, to remember that his sexuality was not something lost in the past, but something quietly waiting for him to come home. So, he started small. A walk in the sun, music that stirred something old inside him, and eventually, gentle self-touch, without shame, without pressure. Just presence. And slowly the fog began to lift. Because when a man reclaims this part of himself, he's not just reigniting desire, he's remembering who he is. The lesson sexual silence, when chosen with intention, can be healing. But when forced by fear or neglect, it can become a cage. And the key isn't a product or a prescription. It's often a shift in how we see ourselves. So if you've been quiet for too long, ask yourself not what you're missing, but what you've been afraid to feel, because healing begins in that very question. And now that we've talked about the mind, what about the body? Next, we'll gently explore what happens physically when ejaculation becomes infrequent, from changes in circulation to the health of the prostate itself. Stay with me. When Richard turned 68, he told himself he was past all that. The urges weren't as strong. His wife had passed, and life had become quieter, slower. At first it felt peaceful, but then came the little signs, frequent nighttime trips to the bathroom, a sense of pressure below the belly that never quite eased, erections that used to come in his sleep, now gone, and strangely, a heaviness in his lower back that seemed unrelated to any injury. He mentioned it casually during a routine checkup. The doctor, kind but direct, asked a question Richard hadn't expected. "When was the last time you ejaculated?" Richard paused. "Nearly 8 months," he said. "Maybe more." The doctor nodded and gently explained something most men are never told. The prostate isn't just a passive gland. It's an active dynamic organ. And like any organ with secretory function, it benefits from regular clearance. Think of it like a kitchen sink. When water flows regularly, everything stays fresh. But when that water sits still, it stagnates. Ejaculation, among its many roles, helps flush the prostatic ducts, reducing congestion, clearing out old seminal fluid, and improving local blood circulation. Without it, the prostate can swell slightly. It becomes more susceptible to inflammation, and over time, this may contribute to the development of prostatitis-like symptoms, urinary discomfort, or even impact the overall health of the reproductive tract. And it's not just the prostate. Blood flow to the penis, especially during spontaneous nighttime erections, serves as a natural oxygenation process. It keeps the tissues healthy, the elasticity intact. When this stops, there can be a gradual decline in vascular health, making it harder to achieve or maintain erections later. Richard's story isn't rare. Many older men experience these subtle shifts and assume it's just aging, but in some cases it's not just age, it's inactivity. Now, this doesn't mean you need to force yourself into a routine. It doesn't mean there's a deadline or obligation, but it does mean listening to your body. Richard started with small, mindful moments, exploring what felt right again. He even found a new rhythm through guided meditation and light touch rekindling, not just function but feeling, and his body responded. Less pressure, fewer bathroom trips, and most surprising to him, better sleep. The body speaks. Softly at first. Through circulation, through sensation, through balance. And when we listen, we're not just caring for a single organ. We're tending to the quiet systems that support vitality at every level. But what if your concern isn't just comfort, but long-term protection? Let's turn next to what science says about ejaculation and prostate cancer, risk, the facts, the myths, and what every man deserves to know. George was never one to read medical studies. But one rainy afternoon, while waiting for his wife at the pharmacy, he picked up a health magazine. The headline caught his eye. Men who ejaculate. More may lower their risk of prostate cancer. He blinked, read it again, then slowly tore out the page, folded it twice, and slipped it into his coat pocket. He didn't say a word, but something about it stayed with him. Later that week, he brought it to his doctor. "I'm not sure what to think of this," he said. "Is this just tabloid stuff, or is there truth here?" The doctor smiled gently. "It's a fair question, George. And actually, the answer isn't as simple as yes or no. Here's what we know." Several large observational studies, notably from Harvard and other respected institutions, have linked higher ejaculation frequency with lower rates of prostate cancer. One study followed over 30,000 men for nearly 2 decades. It found that men who ejaculated 21 times per month, particularly in their 40s and 50s, had a lower risk of developing prostate cancer later in life compared to those with less frequent ejaculation. But here's the key correlation isn't causation. It could be that men who are more sexually active also tend to be more active in general, eat better, have better cardiovascular health, all factors that influence cancer risk. Still, one plausible biological explanation lies in prostate clearance. Ejaculation may help expel carcinogenic substances or metabolic byproducts that build up in the prostatic fluid over time. Think of it like flushing the system. Another theory is hormonal. Frequent sexual activity may help regulate testosterone levels more steadily, avoiding prolonged peaks or dips that might otherwise contribute to abnormal cell growth. Now, does that mean every man should count his ejaculations like vitamins? Of course not. That misses the point. What this research offers isn't a prescription. It's a gentle nudge, a reminder that staying connected to your body and embracing your sexuality without guilt or shame may actually support long-term prostate health. George didn't suddenly mark his calendar, but he did start looking at intimacy not as something frivolous or past its time, but as part of his care, his rhythm, his way of staying rooted in life. And that shift, that simple reframing, made all the difference. Because sometimes prevention doesn't come in a pill, it comes in presence. And now that we've explored the physical and emotional landscape, let's ask one more important question. Can stopping ejaculation entirely ever be dangerous? Is there a real risk in complete suppression? Let's explore that together. Martin was a quiet man, 74, retired, widowed, and content with his garden, his cat, and the crossword puzzles that kept his mind sharp. He hadn't been sexually active in years, not out of sadness or trauma, just life. But during a routine physical, his doctor gently asked, "How's everything going with your sexual health?" Martin chuckled. "Well, Doc, it's been a long time. I think I'm just done with all that." The doctor nodded, but followed with another question. "Have you noticed any discomfort when urinating, less energy, or trouble sleeping through the night?" Martin paused. "Actually, yes." And that's when the conversation changed. You see, long-term sexual inactivity, especially when it includes total absence of ejaculation, isn't necessarily dangerous for every man. But for some, it can quietly contribute to a series of slow, subtle shifts in the body. Let's be clear, this isn't about morality or masculinity. It's about physiology. The male reproductive system is active by design even in older age. Seminal fluid is constantly being produced, and when it isn't released, either through ejaculation or other forms of clearance, it must be reabsorbed or expelled through other minor processes. In most cases, the body handles this just fine. but in others, prolonged inactivity may lead to prostate congestion, increased risk of inflammation or irritation, sometimes presenting as mild prostatitis, a gradual decline in spontaneous erections, which are crucial for penile tissue health, and a potential increase in performance anxiety, particularly if intimacy is later desired. There's also something deeper, a sense of emotional detachment from the body. Many men report that after long periods of suppression, they feel awkward or even fearful about reclaiming their sexuality. Martin wasn't in danger, but he realized he had quietly surrendered something that once made him feel vibrant. So, with no pressure, he began again. A walk, a breath, a warm bath, a gentle reminder that sexual energy doesn't always mean intercourse. It means aliveness, presence, flow. His doctor recommended pelvic floor exercises and mindful touch, not to meet a goal but to reconnect. And slowly, Martin noticed his sleep improved. His mood lightened. Even the crossword clues came a little faster. The point. Not every man needs to ejaculate regularly to be healthy, but every man deserves to understand his own rhythms and to listen to his body without shame, fear, or silence. Which brings us to one last tender question. What if you've been silent for too long? What if you're not sure where to start, or if it's even possible to feel whole again? Let's finish with a few gentle steps. Simple, natural ways to restore connection, regain confidence, and return home to your body. One breath at a time. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for watching, but for staying present with your questions, your body, your memories. Because this wasn't just a video about sex, it was a quiet invitation to look within, to remember that your body is not a problem to fix, but a story still unfolding. We've talked about research, about ejaculation, cancer hormones, even heartache, but beneath all the science, there's a simpler truth. You matter. Your pleasure matters. Your health, your joy, not because they make you useful or masculine or young again, but because they remind you that you are alive. And aliveness is not measured in performance or frequency or numbers. It's measured in how you feel when you wake up, when you look in the mirror, when you reach across the table and feel no shame in the hand you offer. So, what now? Maybe tonight you take 5 quiet minutes. Breathe. Place your hand on your chest. Ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? Maybe you begin again, with a stretch, a slow touch, a conversation, a memory that no longer needs to hurt, because your body isn't behind you. It's with you, still listening, still waiting. And if you're looking for a simple, natural way to reconnect, to feel strong, energized, and confident again, we've left a gentle suggestion below. It's safe, it's easy, and it may just be the small shift that brings your rhythm back to life. You don't need to become someone new. You only need to come home to the man you've always been. And we'll be right here walking beside you. Take care, friend. And if this journey touched something in you, pass it on. Because someone else out there is still waiting for permission to feel again, and maybe that permission comes from you.